You're lying to my face again, aren't you, Karen? I shouted, slamming the phone down on the counter as she stood across from me in our kitchen. Her arms crossed and a smug look plastered on her face. I don't know what you're talking about, Brad, she said, rolling her eyes like I was a child throwing a tantrum. You're imagining things again. God, you're so insecure. Insecure, I barked, holding up the screenshot I just found. Then explain why I'm looking at texts from Rick on your phone saying, "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about your pussy." Explain that, Karen. She blinked, momentarily caught off guard, but recovered quickly. Oh my God, Brad. Rick is gay. He's my coworker, for Christ's sake. He's probably messing with me. You know how gay guys are. They say stuff like that all the time. I stared at her, my jaw tightening. Do you think I'm a fucking idiot? Gay or not, this isn't just playful banter. There's more here, and you know it. Karen stepped closer, lowering her voice like she thought she could still sweet-talk her way out of this. Baby, you're blowing this way out of proportion. Rick and I are just close friends. He was probably drunk when he sent that, nothing more. Can we just drop it? You're ruining my morning. Drop it. I shot back, laughing bitterly. You're cheating on me, Karen. And not just with Rick, are you? Who else is there? Tell me now before I find out myself. She threw her hands up in the air, feigning exasperation. Oh my God. Brad, do you hear yourself? You're paranoid. This is why our marriage has been so hard lately. You're always looking for something that isn't there. I didn't respond. Instead, I turned and grabbed her phone off the counter. She lunged for it, but I held it out of reach. Give me my phone, Brad, she shrieked. You have no right to go through my private messages. Oh, I have every right, considering you've been lying to me for God knows how long. I snarled, unlocking the phone with the passcode I'd memorized months ago. As soon as the messages loaded, my stomach dropped. It wasn't just Rick. There were conversations with at least 3 other men, all laced with explicit details about their hookups. My hands shook as I scrolled through photos she'd sent, nude selfies, suggestive poses in the lingerie I'd bought her last Christmas. You're disgusting, I said, my voice low and cold. I trusted you, and you turned our marriage into a joke. Karen didn't even bother denying it this time. Instead, she crossed her arms and smirked. Well, maybe if you weren't such a boring, controlling asshole, I wouldn't have to look elsewhere for attention. I stared at her, disbelief flooding my veins. So it's my fault you've been spreading your legs for half the city? Is that really what you're going with? Oh, grow up, Brad, she snapped. Men like you don't know how to keep a woman happy. You should have seen this coming. The words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I swallowed the pain and shoved her phone back into her hand. You're going to regret this, I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Whatever, she said, turning on her heel. I'm going out. Don't wait up. I watched her leave, slamming the door behind her. My fists clenched at my sides as I replayed the conversation in my head, each word fueling my anger. If Karen thought she could humiliate me and walk away unscathed, she had no idea who she was dealing with. As soon as the door slammed behind Karen, I grabbed my laptop and started digging. If she thought her arrogance and lies could mask her infidelity, she was dead wrong. I wasn't going to let her continue treating me like a fool. This time, I'd arm myself with proof, real, undeniable proof. The first thing I did was access her email. She'd been careless enough to leave her password saved on my browser months ago, and she clearly hadn't thought to change it. Within minutes, I was sifting through receipts for hotel bookings, lingerie I'd never seen her wear, and even gift cards sent to men whose names I didn't recognize. Each new discovery was like pouring acid onto an already open wound. One receipt stood out in particular. A booking confirmation for a weekend getaway at a resort 3 hours away. The reservation was for this upcoming weekend, just 2 days from now. The name of the second guest? Rick. My blood boiled. So she wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. I clicked on the resort's website, memorizing the address. If Karen wanted to have her fun, I'd make sure her little escapade ended in the most humiliating way possible. The next day, Karen acted like nothing had happened. She strutted around the house, scrolling through her phone and humming to herself, oblivious to my growing rage. I played along, pretending I hadn't uncovered every disgusting detail of her affair. Got plans this weekend? I asked casually over dinner. Karen barely looked up from her plate. Just a girls' trip. You know, Amy and the usual crew. We're heading to the spa to relax. I nodded, hiding my smirk. That's nice. You deserve it. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was trying to gauge whether I was being sarcastic. But I kept my expression neutral, and she quickly returned to her meal. The rest of the evening passed uneventfully, but inside, I was buzzing with anticipation. My plan was falling into place, and Karen had no idea what was coming. On Saturday morning, Karen packed her overnight bag and kissed me on the cheek before heading out the door. "Don't wait up," she said with a wink. As soon as her car disappeared down the street, I grabbed my own bag and headed out. I'd already booked a room at the same resort under a fake name, ensuring I'd have a front row seat to the shit show about to unfold. When I arrived at the resort, I checked in and headed straight to the bar. I didn't have to wait long before I spotted Karen and Rick entering the lobby, hand in hand like a pair of lovesick teenagers. She was wearing a dress I'd never seen before, one that clung to her curves in all the right places. It was obvious she'd dressed to impress. I followed them at a safe distance, watching as they checked in and made their way to their room. My hands clenched into fists at the thought of what they'd be doing behind that door, but I forced myself to stay calm. I had a bigger goal in mind. Later that night, I put phase 2 of my plan into action. I'd already arranged for a private investigator to follow Karen, and he'd captured photos of her and Rick entering the resort together. Now, I just needed to ensure those images made their way to everyone who mattered: her family, her friends, and most importantly, her boss. I drafted an email, attaching the photos along with a brief explanation of Karen's activities. "To whom it may concern," I began, "I thought you should know the truth about Karen's behavior." Attached are photos documenting her ongoing affair, taken during a business trip she claimed to be on. "This is the woman you've trusted and supported. Make of it what you will." I hit send, watching as the email made its way to every recipient on my list. It was a petty move, sure, but after everything she'd put me through, I felt no guilt. Karen deserved every ounce of humiliation coming her way. I wasn't done yet. The final step was confronting them in person. I waited until the following morning, knowing they'd be relaxed and off guard. When I knocked on their door, it took a moment for them to answer. Rick opened the door, his hair messy and a sheet wrapped around his waist. "Can I help you?" he asked, his brow furrowed. I didn't bother responding. I shoved past him into the room, where Karen was sitting on the bed in nothing but a robe. Her face turned white as a sheet when she saw me. "Brad, what the fuck are you doing here?" she stammered. "Catching you in the act," I said, pulling out my phone and snapping a photo of the two of them. "Smile for the camera, Karen. This one's going in the divorce file." Karen scrambled to her feet, her hands outstretched. "Brad, wait. Let me explain." "Explain what?" I barked. "That you're a lying, cheating bitch who's been fucking half the town? I've already seen the texts, the photos, the receipts. Don't even try to deny it." Rick tried to intervene. "Hey man, this doesn't have to get ugly." I turned on him, my fury boiling over. "Shut the fuck up, Rick. You're nothing but a spineless piece of shit screwing a married woman. Stay out of this." Rick backed off, raising his hands in surrender. Karen, meanwhile, was desperately trying to salvage the situation. "Brad, please," she begged. "It didn't mean anything. I was just confused." "Confused," I repeated, laughing bitterly. "You don't look very confused to me. You look pretty damn comfortable, actually."
I stepped closer, towering over her.
"This is the last time you'll humiliate me, Karen. When we get back, I'm filing for divorce. You can keep Rick and your pathetic little lies, but you're losing everything else." Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. She knew she was beaten, and there was nothing she could say to fix it. Karen stood there, trembling, her robe clutched tightly around her body. Rick shuffled awkwardly by the door, clearly hoping I'd leave so he could slink away unnoticed. But I wasn't finished with either of them. I leaned closer to Karen, lowering my voice to a venomous whisper. "You thought you could play me for a fool, that I'd just roll over and take it. But let me tell you something, Karen. This isn't over. Not by a long shot." I turned to Rick. "And you. If I were you, I'd start packing. Julie's going to love the photos I sent her." Rick's eyes widened in panic. "What the hell are you talking about?" "Oh, you'll find out soon enough," I said, smirking. I made sure she got every juicy detail. Enjoy explaining yourself to her. I hear divorce lawyers love cases like this. Before either of them could respond, I spun on my heel and walked out of the room. The sound of Karen's panicked voice yelling after me was music to my ears. But I wasn't done yet. My final act was still to come. On the drive back home, my phone buzzed constantly. Karen had finally realized the full extent of what I'd done. Her text swung wildly between anger and desperation. "You bastard! How could you embarrass me like that? Brad, please, we need to talk. I made a mistake. You're overreacting. It wasn't serious. Let's fix this." I didn't bother responding. Her pleas didn't matter anymore. By the time she realized just how thoroughly I'd dismantled her life, it would be too late. When I got home, I immediately contacted my lawyer to finalize the next steps. The photos, texts, and emails were already more than enough evidence to secure a favorable divorce settlement, but I wanted to go further. I wanted to strip Karen of everything she thought she'd get away with keeping. "Let's make sure she walks away with nothing," I told my lawyer. "I don't care what it takes." He nodded. "With the evidence you've provided, that won't be a problem. But I'll warn you, this could get messy." "Good," I said, a dark grin spreading across my face. "Let it get messy." The fallout began almost immediately. Julie, true to her word, had already filed for divorce from Rick and kicked him out of their house. She sent me a message later that day. "Thank you for exposing the truth. He's out of my life for good. Let me know if you need anything." Meanwhile, Karen's boss had received the email I'd sent, complete with the explicit photos and a detailed account of her business trips. By the next morning, Karen was out of a job. Her employer cited a violation of company ethics, which I found fitting, considering how little Karen seemed to have any. Karen's parents weren't spared either. I'd sent the same evidence to her father, a stern man who had always held his family to high moral standards. The last time I spoke to him, he called Karen a disgrace and told me he was ashamed of her behavior. For once, I agreed with him. Karen finally showed up at the house 2 days later. Her face was pale, her hair disheveled, and her usual smug attitude was nowhere to be seen. She looked like someone who had lost everything because she had. "Brad, please," she said, standing on the porch with her bag in hand. "I need to talk to you." I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. "What do you want, Karen? Haven't you done enough?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I don't have anywhere else to go. My parents won't take me in. I lost my job and Julie. She told me to never contact her again." "Good for Julie," I said coldly. "She's smarter than I gave her credit for." Karen stepped closer, her voice trembling. "I know I messed up, okay? I was selfish and stupid, but I still love you, Brad. I want to make things right." I laughed bitterly. "You want to make things right? Karen, you destroyed everything we had. You lied to me, humiliated me, and slept with multiple men. There's no coming back from that." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "Please, Brad," she whispered. "I'll do anything. Just give me one more chance." I stared at her, my anger simmering just beneath the surface. "Anything?" I repeated. "You'll do anything?" She nodded eagerly, desperation etched into her face. "Yes, anything. I swear." "Good," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "Because you're about to find out what it feels like to lose everything." Once inside, I laid out my terms. Karen would sign the divorce papers without contesting a single thing. She wouldn't get a dime of alimony, and she'd leave the house within a week. If she refused, I promised to make her life even more miserable than it already was. "You've already ruined my life," she said, tears streaming down her face. "What more do you want from me?" "I want you gone," I said bluntly. "And I want you to remember every single second of the hell you put me through." Karen signed the divorce papers the next morning. She didn't put up a fight. She couldn't. Every move she made was a reminder that she was at my mercy now. Once the ink was dry, I gave her a deadline to pack her things and leave the house. I wasn't going to tolerate her presence a second longer than necessary. But I wasn't finished yet. I had one final act of revenge planned, something that would ensure Karen never forgot the consequences of her betrayal. The following weekend, I hosted a barbecue at our house. Friends, family, neighbors, even some of Karen's old coworkers were invited. The turnout was bigger than I'd expected, with everyone eager to hear how I was holding up after the sudden split. Karen showed up halfway through the party to collect the last of her belongings. She tried to slip in unnoticed, but I was waiting for her. "Karen," I called out, raising my voice so the entire crowd could hear. Perfect timing. "I've got something to share with everyone." She froze in her tracks, her face turning ashen as I gestured for her to join me on the patio. The guests gathered around, their curiosity piqued. "What are you doing, Brad?" she hissed, her voice low and trembling. "Just a little presentation," I said with a smirk, holding up my phone. "I think everyone deserves to know the real reason we're getting divorced." I connected my phone to the patio's outdoor speakers and played the audio recordings I'd compiled from her phone calls. Explicit conversations with Rick and the other men echoed through the yard, their filthy words leaving no doubt about Karen's infidelity. The crowd gasped. Some people covered their mouths in shock, while others stared at Karen with open disgust. Karen's face turned bright red as she tried to grab my phone, but I stepped back, holding it out of her reach. "Brad, stop this!" she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're humiliating me." I looked her dead in the eyes. "You humiliated yourself, Karen. I'm just making sure everyone knows the truth." As the recordings ended, I pulled out a printed stack of emails and texts, handing them to anyone who wanted to see. The party turned into a spectacle, with guests passing around evidence of Karen's betrayal like it was the evening's entertainment. Karen fled the house in tears, her belongings abandoned in the driveway. She didn't come back for them. I donated most of her things to charity the next day, erasing the last traces of her from my life. Rick wasn't spared either. Julie made good on her promise to divorce him, and she took him for everything he had. The photos I'd sent to his boss ensured he was fired from his cushy job, leaving him broke and alone. Last I heard, he'd moved to another state trying to start over. Karen, meanwhile, became the talk of the town. Her reputation was ruined, and she couldn't find work anywhere local. She ended up moving in with a relative 2 states away, her tail between her legs.